But Larry Gulko has spent a lifetime believing, and that's the word I come away with. He believes all this. And that's the thing that I'm really taking away from what he said is you got to believe this. You got to live this. Otherwise, it's not about the brand name. It's about brand equity. And if you're not living it, if your company's not living it as a CEO, you better reassess.
And it permeates your organization. It's really about your organization. It's all the way through your organization, all the way down to your people, your processes, your product, your presentation. It's all about what is your brand, what's your brand strategy. I thought was fascinating actually was thinking about McDonald's versus Wendy's and thinking about how they gear their brand strategy for different audiences.
Yeah.
And looking at that as a CEO and saying, wow, if they can make that level of distinction, what level of distinction can I make? What level of distinction should I make? And then you think about the simplicity of some of what's going on. Everyone talks about, you talk about Zappos, you talk about Nordstrom's, but the simplicity of what he said. So a lot of people say the customer's always right, the customer's always right. It's almost to the point where that's boring. But the idea that you have one word to say and that's yes. Such a different message that sends. Yes, that means that the customer's always right, but it's more important, you always say yes. You never say that two-letter word. You always say yes. It's a different way of thinking. It's a different way of imparting your message on the customer, on your team to get it to the customer. And the customer feels a lot different because of it.
Whenever we have a guest on this show and they start talking about what they're passionate about, like Larry today, I'm always starting with us and what we do. And the thing I'm most buoyed about is that we work with our clients and we tell them, we'll help you tell your stories. That's what Larry's talking about. Understand what your story is. Your story is not that for McDonald's and Wendy's. Your story is that your kids' hamburgers. That's your story. I remember talking to a guy who wanted to start a sports radio station for kids. And he told me at the time, he goes, yeah, our audience is kids. I go, no, it's not. Your audience is the parents. Right. Your audience is the occupy my kids while I'm driving in my car. Right. If you want to target them, and that's making me happy. So we're on the right track with helping our clients tell our stories, because if you're sitting out there and you're a CEO, maybe you're not in the business of storytelling, but you better figure out that you have a story to tell and how you're going to tell it. That's sort of marketing principles 101.
And if you think about how that positions your company, if you think about all the different things you do and how you position your company, that becomes key. And remember the one point we hammer home. We hammer home all the time on CEO Corner, metrics, metrics, metrics. If you can't measure it, don't do it. And yet at the same time, we talk about brand and brand strategy. Larry was very clear, and the examples were incredibly clear, that you can measure it. You measure it not in the most basic, simplistic way, but you're measuring, for instance, look at what we talked about with Disney. You're measuring it by, can I shorten that window by which that family will come back? You're measuring it based on how we look at Zappos. Will that customer come back to us? You're measuring it based on where, as we talked about Nordstrom, will that customer tell other customers, bring other customers to the store? I can absolutely measure the investment I'm making in terms of, and look at different metrics. And then not only that, but as I look at the measurement, so if you think about the steps here, the steps are one, figure out what you want to emulate, what you want your brand vision to be. Then you look at what are the metrics that you're going to measure that by, and then figure out, okay, what are the things I need to do to implement that metrics? Because for instance, if you go back to Zappos, if Zappos hadn't have said, complete and utter customer satisfaction, how do I satisfy that? By giving a free return policy. And instead they said, well, we're just going to do a free return policy. But they didn't wrap that into a brand strategy. It would have been lost. And there's a lot of other people out there. There's a lot of other retailers who say,
sell it in a bag.
Well, there's retailers who say, well, I do it too. I do it too. Why him, not me? What makes me any different? Well, what makes him different is that process, that culture is wrapped inside of everything that they do. It's what they're a part of, and that's the key for every CEO out there.
All right, final comment on his takeaways. Do a brand audit.
Yep.
Look at your team,
yep.
See if you have the right people, and if you do, challenge them to understand that they get the right people around them. Feedback from consumers, and then look at, refine, and reinforce your messaging with your branding. Build brand equity.
And cut out any one situation that's antithetic to what you're doing. If you've got one broken piece, get rid of it right away. If you've got one person in one store, one person on one phone, one person on one email, the end of one email exchange, that could tarnish and harm your brand, get rid of it right away.